Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. We are here today to talk about equipment in Magic the Gathering, the danger that it posed to the game overall, and the new situation that we've moved into that hopefully remedies the overall problem with equipment. Some of you may have noticed that there was a while there where they really ramped down the amount of equipment that we saw. Equipment is not really like a new concept in Magic the Gathering, obviously, because it showed up around the time of the Mirrodin block, but it still feels like it showed up somewhere in the middle to me. You can see how long I've been in Magic the Gathering when you look at how I time frame parse things out. But equipment's obviously a subset of artifacts, and as a result they have some of the same problems that plague all artifacts in Magic the Gathering, the what I call the colorless conundrum, where you have the ability to put these cards into any deck, and that causes a real problem. Now, thankfully, equipment doesn't cause as much of a problem as regular artifacts have. In fact, there's only one piece of equipment that's really needed, like fully needed, to be banned outright. We're going to take a look at that right now. Up on the screen, you are going to see Skull Clamp, the dirtiest piece of equipment ever made in Magic the Gathering. And this one is clearly a mistake. So, it's a 1 colorless casting artifact, and it gives equipped creature +1/-1. When equipped creature is put into a graveyard, draw 2 cards. Now, originally, when they concepted this card, it used to give +1/+1, and still did the same thing. It still cost 1 to put out, 1 to equip, but it was like, okay, it boosts the creature, and you get to draw 2 cards. Now, somebody at Wizards of the Coast thought, wait, this feels too strong. Giving a creature +1/+1 as well as letting them draw off it seems like too powerful. Why don't we change the +1 to -1? So it's +1/-1, so it'll weaken the creature, and you can't just beef up a little donk automatically. If you tried to equip this to, let's say, like a 1/1 or a 2/1, the Skull Clamp is just going to destroy the creature right away, so you can't get that boost and the card feels less strong. Now, that change was made very shortly before the card was printed. And obviously, if they had tested the card out, they would have realized that going +1/-1 actually makes it stronger. And what people would do with this is just feed token creatures to it. This basically reads like, pay 1 mana, sacrifice a creature with 1 toughness, draw 2 cards. Do as much as you want. And so this card ended up being absolutely broken. Skull Clamp is single-handedly the dumbest, strongest piece of equipment ever made. Now, the problem is compounded by the casting cost. If you notice, 1 colorless, or generic mana, as the screamy kids in my comment section like to say, is accessible to every color, right? Doesn't matter what color you are playing, you can get access to Skull Clamp. And that is a problem overall with artifacts and other colorless cards like your Emeralds and things like that, is that everyone has access to them with no restrictions. So Skull Clamp ran rampant and needed to be banned. But even aside from being banned, there are certain pieces of equipment, I should say, that when combined together get out of hand. For anybody who's been playing long enough, you will remember the days of Caw-Blade. Caw-Blade was a real simple concept. Get yourself a dumb little 1/1 bird creature and slap a bunch of swords onto it that all, like, there was a series of swords that all had abilities that would trigger and give you 2 effects in one go. So for example, Sword of Fire and Ice will deal 2 damage to any target and let you draw a card on top of giving the creature +2/+2. So you equip that to a little bird, all of a sudden you've got a 3/3 flyer that when it hits your opponent you do 2 damage to any target and draw a card. Now, people started putting multiple swords into the same deck. No problem whatsoever. Oh look, I can have a Sword of Fire and Ice, I can have a Sword of Light and Shadow, I can put them all in the same creature. And on top of what I'm talking about, they also give the creature protection from the colors. So the red-blue one, oh, you've also got protection from red and blue. Like, the swords were just stupidly powerful. Just insanely powerful, and there was no restriction on what deck you could put them in. As long as you had creatures, you could just be like, okay, I'm good. I'm gonna grab a bunch of these and slap them in there. So you'll notice that over time, these sort of sword shenanigans started at the dawn of the equipment age. When equipment first showed up, they really didn't understand how powerful it was going to be. The idea behind equipment was it was supposed to be similar to like an enchantment, but one of the problems with enchant creatures specifically is when you enchant a creature, if your opponent destroys that creature, now you're one card behind. They basically 2-for-1'd you. By using one of their spells, they've gotten rid of your creature and the enchantment, and that sets you back in terms of card advantage. Well, equipment fixes that problem. If you destroy the creature that's holding a sword, well, guess what? The sword is still intact, sticking around for somebody else to pick up. So it made sense from a flavor perspective. Obviously, if somebody gets destroyed, their gear could be left behind. So that makes sense from a flavor standpoint. And from a power perspective, it solved the issue of getting 2-for-1 because you don't get 2-for-1, your equipment doesn't get destroyed. So in terms of coming up with a concept, it works as a concept, but they didn't understand balancing levels for it. So they made some really, really broken equipment. Thankfully, nothing else was on the level of Skull Clamp and needing a ban, but still overall, equipment was too strong. So after a while of making this too strong equipment, they decided to dial it back, and we started to see what are essentially weak pieces of equipment. Like that, if you look at, let's look at Core 2020 for example. Look at the equipment in Core 2020. First of all, there's not very much of it. It's not very strong. Like you have like an axe that gives like +2/+0. Who cares about that? You got to pay 2 mana to put out it, 2 to equip, and it just gives +2/+0. That's weak. And then you have Heartseeker Bow, which is 2 to put out, 1 to equip, and does 1 damage to one of your opponent's creatures when you attack with the creature equipped with a bow. Now granted, Heartseeker's Bow was fairly gross in a draft scenario where if you could get 3 or 4 of them and get them on the board, you could have an oppressive board state where you could wipe out your opponent's creatures. But there was no way on this planet that you would ever end up with a deck where you were running Heartseeker Bows or the axe, right? You're like, in draft, sure, you're gonna grab them because, hey, the axe is gonna add some beef to a little donk that you're gonna use to smash into your opponent. No problem, who cares? It's not a big deal, right? It's like, okay, it's good in draft, but outside of it, it doesn't matter. Same with the bow. You're never gonna look at your deck and go, man, I really want these artifacts in here, because they're inherently weak. So the fact that they're colorless and can be put into any deck is a non-issue, because it's not going to affect standard in any real way. It's only going to matter in draft. And that's what we had seen with equipment for a while now. It had been a while because they were working on a solution, and they've enacted the solution with Throne of Eldraine. And I've been playing Throne of Eldraine drafts, and I have noticed the difference in the equipment. In all honesty, Throne of Eldraine's equipment feels stronger. It feels better. It feels good, but it has a balancing issue that has been solved by Wizards of the Coast by basically changing equipments into color-aligned objects. It solves the problem. Now, admittedly, it does kind of make them step a little bit on enchantment's toes in that regard by being color-aligned, but that is a minor issue overall, and I think it's fantastic because it allows them to push the power level again on equipment in a way that they just couldn't if they were still colorless. And the perfect example to me of that from modern times, something we're all going to be familiar with, or at least most of us, is Embercleave. I mean, you look at Embercleave, it's 2 red, 4 colors for a legendary sword. And it's got flash, so you can play it at instant speed. It costs 1 less to cast for each attacking creature that you control. So clearly the ideal scenario is to be playing it when you're mid-swing. So it's a sword that's an instant combat trick as well, which is really cool. When it enters the battlefield, it automatically attaches to a creature you control. Again, that's going to be necessary for this flash surprise. Like, surprise, you didn't know this was about to hit the board. And the equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has double strike and trample. That's a lot to slap onto almost any creature. Just giving any creature +1/+1 double strike and trample makes it a force to be reckoned with. A simple 1/1 is capable all of a sudden of taking down like a 4/4 creature or dealing 4 damage to your opponent, and that's just on a 1/1. Now, if this card was colorless, this would be included in a number of decks because the power level of this card is pretty decent. This isn't just draft chaff like the other artifacts that we spoke about, the other equipment specifically we spoke about. But this, if they had not aligned it to red, we would see a bunch of people playing with this card, and it could easily become a problem. Now, admittedly, it's just an equipment that is good for like just one thing, boosting your creature with double strike and trample and everything. I mean, technically, I guess it's good for 3 things: the pump, the trample, and the double strike. But what I mean is, it's not as dumb as one of the old swords that we talked about. Those things were stupid. The power level on those is just bonkers busted. Embercleave is more reasonable, but if it was not color aligned, it would be unreasonable. So to me, Embercleave represents very well how they figured out a way to make more powerful equipment without unbalancing the environment by going, okay, everybody's going to play with it. We've all seen artifacts that become auto-includes in everybody's deck. Our recent example was Smuggler's Copter. That one was, everybody was playing 4 copies of, so that ended up getting banned. It's never a good feeling when cards get banned because they're representing too much of the organized field of cards, you know? When you go into tournaments, it's like, okay, everybody's playing this card. That means Wizards of the Coast is messed up. So in terms of colored artifacts overall, I don't think that they've really found the perfect sweet spot. I think color aligning artifacts altogether is a smart move, but when you look at banned cards like Birthing Pod, which is a green aligned card, you do need green mana to pay for it, but it also is like Phyrexian mana, so you can argue that it's not even actually a green aligned artifact. You could just go, no, you can just pay for it with life. So man, that could be the sole reason that Birthing Pod is the only color aligned artifact on the banned list. Overall, I think that color aligning artifacts is a really smart move on Wizards' part, specifically when it comes to equipment, because we're allowed to have more powerful equipment, and equipment is a feel-good object. I enjoy equipment. I've been enjoying that spear that whenever you damage, it's like the, what is it, like giant spear, ogre's meat spear or something? Well, I can't remember the name of it, but either way, when it gets +2/+1, and whenever the creature hits another creature, you get food. It just carves off, like, yeah, you're gonna be my dinner. That's cool. I like it. I like the different aligned artifacts. You've got that crazy green halberd. You've got the blue equipment that attaches every time you draw your second card. It feels like this sort of stuff is balanced out by its casting cost as opposed to being unbalanced and usable by everybody. So I, for one, think it's fantastic that Wizards of the Coast has gone down this route. I'm happy to see equipment coming back because there was a point, I actually did a video talking about how there might not be any more equipment in Magic the Gathering. If you're interested in the discussion of that, it is a somewhat older video. I will link it here at the end of the video to check it out. What I'll do is I'll leave that up, and I will leave up a link to my lore playlist if you want to hear about some crazy awesome lore from Magic the Gathering. Those will be your options, and you can see obviously names are scrolling by right now. These are my patrons and channel members. Thank you very much for supporting what I do. To everyone I say, thanks for coming on by, and I shall see you all tomorrow.